Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Jamestown Public School Board to order. It is Monday, March 17th, 2025, 5:30 p.m. in the Thompson Community Room of the middle school. We'd like to welcome all those in the audience this evening. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jacob, would you read the school board norms?
Yep. The board developed norms are to share and respect opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, execute all duties of the school board in compliance with North Dakota Century Code, properly prepare for meetings, commit to assessing board effectiveness, and ensure high-quality governance for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Jacob. Next on our agenda, we have Kathy Scott for public communication. Kathy, come on forward to the podium. And please state your name and your address for our record. Erin, you want to help her with the mic there? Just a little bit tall. There, thank you.
Not used to that either.
All right.
My name is Kathy Scott, or Catherine Scott, and my address is 2940 94th Avenue Southeast, Spiritwood, North Dakota, 58481. And I'm here to request an update in the foreign exchange student policy. I would like to see the last little paragraph of it to be changed or a clause added to it to allow out-of-district families or persons to go through the open enrollment process to enroll a foreign exchange student. So I would wish that this is something you would discuss and that extra clause could be added in there. The policy, Mr. Heiner told me, was drawn up in 2006. And I have been enrolling exchange students in Jamestown High School for 20 years with that as it's stated now, and I shouldn't have been, I guess, because that's what it's stated. But if you could please talk about that and put that extra little clause in there, because I think it's depriving the student body of cultural exchange if out-of-district families cannot go through that open enrollment process and enroll. I do have a family that lives just 3 miles up the road from me that I do know wants to host. And they have enrolled their children, or they have 2 daughters, in Jamestown High School from kindergarten up. So it wouldn't make sense for them to host a student and have to send it to Barnes County North. So if you all can think about that and do what you feel is right, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on in our agenda, are there any conflicts of interest to declare for this agenda? Any conflicts of interest? Erin?
Just the standard
Same.
issue, same
Okay.
one, yep.
Okay. Anyone else? Jacob, same. Any other conflicts of interest for this agenda? Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion? Motion by Steve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jason. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion or any item you'd like clarification or something removed for further discussion on the consent agenda? Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on to our regular agenda, under recognition, we have nothing tonight. Under correspondence, we did receive a card from Lynn Settle for the remembrance of a family member. Under reports, student council report. We have a student council report tonight. Please come forward and tell us your name and what's up with the student council.
Hello, for those who don't know me, I'm Hattie McDonald. I'm the president of the student council at JHS. This month's student council as a whole doesn't have anything to work on. However, the junior class is finishing all their prom planning. Prom is on March 22nd, and we are planning on selling Grand March tickets this week during lunch, and Grand March will be at 8 p.m. on Saturday. Do you guys have any questions?
Good. Any questions from the board? Any questions? Okay.
Okay,
Thank you so much for coming. Under reports, we also have our audit report. You can refer to your governance letter. And then Christy, do you want to help? Just, we have them on here on the screen.
We have Craig from Widmer Roll, and he's going to present the audit report.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you to all the members of the school board, Dr. Leck and Christy as well.
Hang on, Craig, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
All right, while they do that, as you guys are noticing here, we have, and aware, we have our first time audit with Widmer Roll. And each, oh, can you?
Go ahead and try.
Can you hear me?
We still can. We're still working on the sound, Craig.
Craig, we're
Sound
still
good?
working on sound. We can't hear you.
I just need a little more, I need something to adjust.
If we can have you keep talking, Craig, so we can try to adjust, see when we hear you.
Still testing.
Okay. We're starting to hear you now. Just
Okay.
need it a little louder.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We're just trying to adjust volume here.
Okay, I'll keep talking until you tell me to stop.
It feels like it's coming through the
Is
projector.
it still pretty quiet?
It's getting better. It sounds like you're coming through our projector and not through our sound system, so we're still working.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh,
I'll
here
just
we
hang
go.
tight.
It's a lot better now.
Yep, much better.
Okay. Can you hear me loud and
Yep.
clear? Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll just start over quick. And yeah, thank you to all the members of the school board and to Dr. Leck and Christy for having us here today. As you said, John and I are on the call. My name's Craig Hashberger. John Worrell's with us too. And we're from Widmer Roll. This is our first year serving as auditors for Jamestown Public School District. And I'll just say, every initial audit is always a challenge, both for us as the auditors and for our clients. In this case, Jamestown School District, just there's a learning curve, and that just comes with the territory. So anyway, we were pleased to have the opportunity. We hope that we'll continue to have the opportunity, and this will be the first of many years of a long-term, professional relationship. So that being said, I think the audit went very well. Now, it's my understanding you should have all the reports on your end. Do you have the PowerPoint presentation, or would it be beneficial for me to share it? I'm not, because we did have some slides that we sent over as part of the agenda, or I can just talk and you can just look
Yeah,
at.
I think
look
you
at me.
should share them if you can,
Okay.
please.
Absolutely. And I'll just keep talking while I'm pulling the physical slides up. It'll only take a moment, but anyway, I'll go ahead and start with, just kind of, what an overview of what is an audit, or what are the audit procedures that we perform to carry out an audit. And this is right from the slides, so I'm just kind of starting off without showing you the slides. We assess the risk that things could go wrong in the financial statements, and when we do that, we consider the possibility of either errors or fraud. And then when we assess that risk, then we design our audit procedures to make sure that we address that risk and reduce it to an acceptably low level, so that we can support our opinions and conclusions on the financial statements. And in this case, as is also the case with Jamestown Public School District, and probably will be for the foreseeable future, your audit was a single audit which means that we also conducted audit procedures regarding compliance with federal guidelines. And I'll talk briefly about that process too at this point. I was going to save it till the end, but I think it'd be good to just recap that. So the school district, any local government that spends, or state government that spends more than $750,000 in federal awards, or it'll be $1 million starting with the 2025 fiscal year, is required to undergo what's called a single audit under the uniform guidance. And through that process, we risk assess the federal awards, and we have to select, based on that risk assessment, one or more grants to test. In this case, we tested Title I, and we did not have any findings, and we were able to conclude that the school district complied with those federal requirements. So that's in the reporting package that we sent to you too, is that single audit report. It would be following the notes to the financial statements. Now, if you'll bear with me, I'll just share. Oh, I don't think I can share because oh yes, I can. Sorry, I just found it. I do have the PowerPoint slides open. There it is. Okay. Seeing the slideshow at this point?
We can see you.
Thank you. Okay, now I talked about the procedures performed. So first and foremost, the audit of the financial statements. So I would, after getting past the cover sheet in our audit report, is the independent auditor, or in the financial statement package, is the independent auditor's report. This audit report states that we covered the year, the date as of, and for the year ended June 30th, 2024. Our opinion is a clean or an unmodified opinion, which that's the best opinion that we can give, which means that the financial statements were free of material misstatements. Some other things that are in this report, it emphasizes the fact that management is ultimately responsible for the information in the financial statements. So, as part of the audit, we collaborate with, we obviously start with the school district's internal accounting records, which are provided to us. And then we propose certain adjustments throughout the process to put the financial statements in the proper presentation format in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and also to ensure the note disclosures are complete and accurate and cover all the required disclosure items. And then any adjustments that we make are provided to management, as well as a draft of the financial statements are provided to management for them to review and approve. Also, our audit report indicates that it was conducted in accordance with government auditing standards, which are those are a separate set of additional standards which are issued by the US OMB the Government Accountability Office. And those standards are, any audit that's performed of a local government in North Dakota is required to be under government auditing standards as well. So there's a separate report on internal control and compliance that we issue, and I'll briefly touch on that at the end as well. Basically indicating that we perform certain testing related to internal controls and compliance. So just then I'm turning next to I'm kind of jumping ahead to the general fund balance sheet, which is on it should be on page 6 of the financial statements. And that one, I really like to look at the governmental fund balance sheet, because it really lays out the financial information in a basis that more closely resembles the budgetary process and the budgetary basis of accounting used by the school board and the school district on an ongoing basis. The first couple of pages represent the statement of net position, the statement of activities, which are required under generally accepted accounting principles, and they include items like debt and property and equipment, and they also include pension liabilities and other related accounts. But I really like to talk about the government funds balance sheet more so, because that, again, it's really more in line with the base of accounting that it's used on a day-to-day basis by management and the board. So again, for this slide, just, there's a little bit of history there on the general fund balances. And the general fund cash balances have remained right around $9 million. give or take, $8 million in 2023. 2021, they were a little bit lower, around $6 million, but kind of been pretty stable, which obviously stability is good. You don't want to see wide swings, and we really haven't been seeing that. Just a couple other financial statement highlights. The fund level, the general fund revenues and expenditures have been fairly, especially in fiscal year 24, they were fairly close to equal, and obviously you don't want to be running a huge surplus or deficit. There were some transfers to cover costs from like the food service fund primarily, that there were transfers out, and once those transfers out occurred, it was virtually a break-even scenario in the general fund in 2024, with the revenues and expenditures net of the transfers out netting to zero. There were just a kind of a note on the journal entries. As I mentioned earlier, we, as part of the audit, we work with management to provide journal entries and adjustments to help bring the financial statements in accordance with GAAP, so that are generally accepted accounting principles. And so there was a total of 11 adjustments, and that's really not all that many. I know it may feel like a big number depending on how you look at it, but it really was not, and that's not an atypical number. So there were some revenue recognition items, some prior period adjustments that we identified, that we kind of caught up from the previous years, and a few other items. There's just some items that need to be reclassified for financial statement presentation related to receivables, payables, and so on. But those adjustments were provided to management for review and approval as well, and they're attached to our financial reporting package. So then I'm going on to the government funds income statement, the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And as you can see, the breakdown of revenues, like the vast majority of revenues coming in are from state sources, and distant second local, and then third federal. And there's a little bit of money that was in the financial statements classified as county, a kind of a negligible amount, but property tax amounts would be categorized under that local category. So, and this breakdown is very typical of school districts in North Dakota. And the general fund expenditures, the regular programs, which that's regular instruction, that would be this instruction, K through 12 instruction that's financed by state and local dollars, not including the federal programs such as Title I, special education, and so on. And then all the other costs, programs, or other costs such as administration and so on, were about 49% of the total general fund expenditure. So, and again, this ratio is not out of line, not surprising, not atypical, with having, more than half of the money being spent by the general fund is going to K through 12 education, which makes sense. Kind of another just bar chart that in the slides breaking down. And again, this is all in the financial statements. This is in that government funds income statement. Kind of a breakdown of the various other costs, administration being the highest. And that obviously covers all the superintendent business expenses, principals, all the costs behind the scenes to run the school district. Special education is like a close second, and would be funded with IDEA or special education funding, federal dollars. And then there's other federal programs, such as title type costs primarily. Those are kind of a distant third, and on down the line. So operation maintenance, that's a cost to run the buildings, keep the facilities, the lights on, and keep the heat on, and all that good stuff. And then the other ones, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. So I'll pause quick and just see if there's any questions, on the financial statements, and then I'll just kind of go on at this point.
Are there any questions from the board at this time? Okay. Oh, continue on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, and then I don't typically spend a lot of time going through the notes to the financial statements, but one kind of caveat that I would mention is the pension note takes up a lot of paper in those financial statements. It's GASB 68 and 75 were passed or were adopted as generally accepted accounting principles just a few years ago, and they really added a lot of bulk to the notes to the financial statements. And there's really very little that's within the school district's control over those. It's all related to NDPERS and TFFR, and it's required disclosure, many, many pages. And there's a very large liability that shows up on the face of the financial statements as well. That liability obviously is not the same as other debt in the sense that there's not a fixed payment that the school district is going to have to make to pay down that debt. It hinges on a lot of factors such as life expectancies, the performance of the markets, which drives the investment performance held by TFFR and NDPERS, and the contribution rates and all that. So the most likely impact of that pension liability number is continued potential increases in the employee and or employer contribution share, probably some legislative action down the road to make some one-time payments to shore up any deficit balances, which would benefit any participating employers and so on. So I like to just talk about those note disclosures because they do take up a lot of pages, but the other note disclosures are really just intended to provide information for the readers of the financial statements. And then I'm going on, there's a communication with the governing board, a letter that we are required to communicate to you certain aspects of the audit, and kind of the subcategories of those like represented in the slide. You know, our responsibility for the audit, the timing, we have to evaluate our independence, and we verified that we are independent of the school district. I heard, you know, declaration of conflicts of interest among board members at the opening, and again, we very much take that seriously on our end as well. And any significant risks, you know, we do disclose those to you there. And we also send a letter with the engagement letter disclosing significant risks. And again, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means that we had to assess risk of a school district in North Dakota and use that to design appropriate audit procedures to support our audit opinions. And then significant accounting practices. If there were any significant difficulties working with management, we would report them to you. There were no such difficulties. And if there was any fraud or anything like that, we would be communicating that here as well. But we would be having a phone call prior to this letter. So there was no such issues like that, thank goodness. So that letter is a required communication to be made in writing from us to you by our auditing standards. So we're doing just that. And next, there's also in the package, there's an internal control report. As I mentioned earlier, these audits in North Dakota are required to be done under what's called government auditing standards. So we issue an internal control report. And then we talk about material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and then if there were other matters. And the definition of material weakness means there's a possibility that there could be a material misstatement that occurs in the financial statements and wouldn't be prevented or detected timely. And then a significant deficiency means, you know, not as serious as a material weakness, but something that we need to communicate to you as a board. We have identified two material weaknesses in our report. One was a general one for audit adjustments, and this is a very typical one that we have with a lot of our clients. And as I mentioned, you know, on the front end, there's the basis of accounting for generally accepted accounting principles really can deviate quite a bit from, you know, what's practical and what's used on an ongoing daily basis for management's purposes in terms of internal financial reporting. So, you know, most school districts across the state report on essentially a cash basis because you're budgeting on a cash basis. But that's not what GAAP or generally accepted accounting principles requires. So there's a new number of audit adjustments that we propose that are approved by management, and it oftentimes we feel it's good to communicate that to you as a board to be aware that those exist and just, you know, make sure that that those are, and we are doing our job to provide those to management as well as the board, so you can be aware what sort of adjustments took place. And then the other one was, I think, probably a one-time one that, as of today, I feel is resolved, and I'm sure is not going to be an issue going forward, but it is something that we needed to bring up, and that was the cash. There were some differences in the cash balances, and it was at the beginning and it mostly had to do with some of the CD balances. There was a couple $100,000 difference between what the reconciled balance and what the financial statements said. The reconciled balance is per the banks versus the financial statements. We worked with Christy and Tammy, and ultimately, as a collaborative effort, discovered what it was. Proposed audit adjustments, it's fixed, and I'm very confident it's not going to be an issue going forward either. So that is something that we need to bring to attention of management and the board, because that's kind of when it comes to government in North Dakota, everything comes down to cash. And if the cash is reconciled, a lot of the other things are just going to fall right into place. But if there's any differences, then things can get a little more concerning. But in this case, I didn't have any heartburn. By the time we got everything resolved, I don't have any heartburn about it anymore. It really was just had to do with some accounting issues, primarily related to buying and redeeming the CDs and that kind of thing. So I'd be more concerned if it was major issues going on in the checking account, which that's not the case. So that's probably all I have to say about that. And again, I already mentioned, but just recap that, we did do this single audit testing over Title I this year, and we had no findings or other issues. And there's a separate report in that package that talks about the scope of our single audit testing as well. So again, it's been a great pleasure to work with you all and to be of service. Appreciate all the hard work that Christy and Tammy put into the audit, and Dr. Leck for his assistance along the way as well. And at this point, I just make myself available to answer any final questions. Otherwise, I'll be happy to step aside and let you proceed with your business.
Any questions for Christy or the auditors or myself, Dr. Leck? Okay, all right. And we need a motion to approve the audit report. Is there a motion? Motion by Jamie. Second by Dan. We have a motion, a second, to approve the audit report as presented. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And thank you to Widmer for the audit. And they can go. Yeah, you can go ahead and sign off on.
Thanks, everybody.
You don't have to sit through, unless you'd like to sit through the rest of the meeting. You're certainly welcome. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on in our agenda here, we have strategic plan progress monitoring. We have strategic focus 3, engagement and learning, goal 2.
You have, you have the progress monitoring report, and Mr. Gaylor and I will kind of tag team this progress monitor report. At least he will add in any of the things that I'm sure to forget. You can see our resource management and planning strategic focus 3 is outlined on slide 2 of the deck. The specific goal addresses the study of equity of education delivery models, schedules, and human resources, and then also some making recommendations moving forward on this strategic goal. We outlined, I start on page 3, we look, and we've talked about vital networks and the survey that we do a couple times a year, a few different times, and there's aspects of this that we thought applied to this goal as well, and that was specifically in the area of workload management. It was one of the areas that we performed under our target area of 5.0. That was an area that was a gap for us, an opportunity for improvement, and that is represented as a district on slide 5 in the deck. And then we broke it also down by elementary, who performed the highest, the closest to our target, in each of those workload management areas, down to the middle school, which is slide 7, and they were pretty much on average compared to the district. They were very close in proximity to the district in terms of the scores. Again, under our targets of 5.0, but close to the district average. At the high school campus, that's where we saw our biggest deficiencies in terms of the responses from staff related to workload management, and they were under our district average and certainly under our target. Again, our target 5.0, so you can see some opportunities for improvement at the high school campus in that area. Moving into some strategies that are currently underway. As a district, we have worked with Vital Network, and that gives us a lot of the data that we just talked about now. And our building leaders have been responsive. I've talked about this before, so I won't go a lot in depth into the process, but we operate at the building level. So, we don't focus on the district level data. That gives us a good sense of the pulse, but the real sausage making goes in at the building level, because there's differences at every building. What's happening at Roosevelt is different than what's happening at the middle school, different than happening at Washington. So it's important that each of our buildings go through, review their specific data, and work towards strategies specific to them. But one commonality we found was meetings. And if workload management is a concern, are we having effective meetings, or are they meetings that could be something else? And so at each of our buildings, people have looked at how can we use our time better, not take the precious time. We all know the best resource we have is time. The most finite resource we have is time. And we want to make sure that the time we're asking our staff to sit in meetings is productive for them. So we've worked to try to decrease that number. We have seen, and you'll see it in this agenda, we've talked about it in a few different meetings, but looking in special education has been a significant hurdle for us in staffing special education. We have looked to a few different, I wouldn't say outside the box, but they are kind of adjacent to the box that we've had to look to. J1 visa teachers, resident teachers, a program called Resident Teachers. It's a way that we can get some staff members trained. They get their coursework done concurrently to working for us, and so it's a way that a program that exists to help that. And then we've used special ed technicians, a position that's called the special ed technicians. We were one of the first districts in North Dakota, and I still think it's an underutilized personnel category to help alleviate some of the burdens that come from those staffing shortages, especially in special ed. We've heard a lot of concerns about substitute teachers and the pool of substitute teachers shrinking. We've tried to work with University of Jamestown to help increase that sub pool, because what happens oftentimes when we don't have subs is our teachers on their preps are filling those spots. And so that, again, is that hitting that resource of time. And so there's more that needs to happen there, but we're trying to increase that substitute pool. A last factor is right-sizing our facility footprint and our number of sections. We've had a lot of conversations in the last few months about elementary sections. And I think you can see, I've given you a report in the last couple of meetings since the decision to retire Washington Elementary, and my superintendent report will outline our last teacher that's been placed. And that's great news to getting that to occur, but it also shows the impact of shortages, that we're able so quickly to fill those internal positions. And I think about what would happen if we didn't, in this year have those teachers that could simply move over into those other positions. And I'll talk a little bit more about my concerns about the shortage in a bit, and the challenges, because I think the shortage is actually worse than we think in our state. And I think there's a few reasons for that, but I think if we don't do something as a state and as a profession fast, we're really going to see that shortage hit us in a couple of years. And honoring time differently, our special education staff, we see a lot in special ed. There's a lot of paperwork requirements that come with our special ed staff. That creates a big time burden. So one of the strategies that's been used across the district, and we try to do this as much as we can, certainly as much as it's requested, but offer professional time, and we get a sub during that classroom time to help those individuals get their paperwork done, because that is an additional burden that comes on, just a little thing that we can do to try to help out. And then we're also looking at strategies to provide or to honor the professional development time beyond their contracted workday. That's another area our professional development curriculum committee has been working on as well. So if you break that kind of the district overview at the elementary level, as the board is fully aware, we've had some different scheduling, and the board has increased the FTE in specials, specifically in physical education, but also in EL to provide a little more support for our students there. That has allowed us to create more collaboration time. Our elementary teachers have had the least amount of collaboration time built into their schedules compared to the middle level and high school. And so we knew we needed to do more there. We certainly heard that from our Vital Network survey and just conversations with staff that more collaboration time was needed, especially at the elementary level. And that has really helped utilizing our SBL leads, our standards-based learning leads, to support curriculum development and enhance leadership within the teams. At the middle school, we have adopted the middle school concept for many years, in decades. Have adopted the middle school concept, and that embeds common planning time in their day. Our middle school has a significant amount of time to plan every single day, and so, continued commitment to that and using that time well is something that we are continuing to work on. At the high school, we've been able to reduce the number of extended contracts, and every time we have an extended contract, that means that somebody's taking some of that collaboration time away to fulfill a curricular need. And so when we can effectively recruit and hire staff, that happens less. We don't have to take that time away from our high school staff. And so as that's shifted and we've had fewer extended contracts, we have to do less, or more time is provided. We have talked in the past, and this board has talked in board education and a board retreat around different secondary schedule models. We've talked, at least at an overview level of what some of those secondary schedules could be and how could they impact time and collaboration for our staff. And we know that we need to continue to have that discussion and engage our high school staff on what those schedules could look like and what the benefits of those schedules would be, how that would impact the work burden of time. When you look at challenges, I'm on slide 13. So declining enrollment in our district is a significant challenge. It's a challenge because a lot of our models, like our middle school model that I just talked about, they're predicated on a certain number of staff, a certain number of teams. And as declining enrollment comes, that's threatened by those teams. Or the team model is threatened, and common planning time is threatened by declining enrollment, because we may be soon in a position where 2 teams aren't the right number. It might be a team and a half. And so what does that look like from a planning standpoint? How do we manage that? And that's a challenge that we're going to have to look creatively at to try to solve, because we know how important that common planning time is, and we don't want to see it go away, but does it need to look different, or does something else need to change? Anytime you're talking, speaking of change, anytime you're talking about change, you need to have a lot of communication, and you need build a lot of capacity around the why behind the change, and what if that happens, then what happens next, and providing professional development, communicating with our staff or different stakeholders, changing our structures. All of that takes time, and that's a challenge that we need to look at as well. And one of the areas that I think we need to continue to focus on is our salary and benefit structures. We want to be able to recruit and retain the very best as we have. If you look in Jamestown Public Schools, I will tell you we have some of the best and brightest teachers anywhere that you can find, and we need to make sure that we can recruit more of them, and we want to make sure that we can retain these high-quality staff that we have, teachers and support staff. But anytime we are in a declining enrollment environment and our funding is so determined by enrollment, we have to make sure that any change that we're making is a sustainable change. So we have to balance those two things of providing the very, very best and also thinking about sustainability in the long term. And staffing is at least in the foreseeable future, going to continue to be a hurdle. And I kind of prefaced this earlier. We have some challenges, especially with some specialists. Those are going to be harder positions to find, and so we have to be creative about what we do for that to continue to find those folks. But as I prefaced earlier, I think the conditions are actually worse than what we think they are, even though they're hard. We have a gap right now, and there was a change made about a decade ago in the Teachers Fund for Retirement, and it changed the early retirement conditions. We're kind of in this bubble period right now where we have about 3 years where new retirees are not eligible to retire because of this change in time. So rule of 85 became the rule of 90 plus the age of 60, okay? And what that means is we have essentially 3 years in which no new early retirees are eligible. We have this gap of time. And so we have current staff that are eligible to retire, but that gap takes us until 2027. And then we start to slowly see that come back. So even though we're seeing people leave us and people retire, had the rule of 85 been in place, you would be seeing quite a few more retirees be eligible. So we're actually in this kind of a gap or kind of a valley period where we're seeing the advantage. It doesn't feel like an advantage because feels like we're bringing a lot of people in and we're struggling for candidates. But without that change, you'd be seeing 5 or 6 more a year that are eligible to retire. And so it feels good, but it's a concerning area that I think that we need to be prepared for, because in 2027, 2028, the new reality, if we don't do more to make sure that we are recruiting and retaining the best people and filling the bucket in our profession of new teachers coming in, this is going to get demonstrably worse. And so I think that's just something I want everybody to be aware of, because when that bubble does burst in 2028, there's going to be more concern across the state, not just Jamestown. So more that we can do to support that will be better. So future considerations, next step, slide 14. We've utilized the Teacher Leadership Academy for a lot of different things. And the board is aware in the presentations you've heard that they provide action research. That's a research over the course of their Teacher Leadership Academy, so 5 semesters. Any work that we can advocate to study workload management solutions would be a welcome action research, but we also have signature assignments, so big assignments that are the focus of a semester, and we'll consider different workload management solutions as part of those signature assignments. So what can we learn from our TLA leaders, our teacher leaders in the TLA about workload management and how we can improve that better. I think we need to build on an initial training we had with artificial intelligence. How can we make work easier for our teachers? And how can we get them comfortable with utilizing AI to try to reduce some of their workload burdens? I talked about a middle school schedule and the fact that we are in a declining enrollment period. We want to protect that common prep time and that common planning time. And how do we do that with declining enrollment? I think we need to be creative, and a middle school schedule committee could help us do that and get some teacher feedback on how that would work. Similarly, I think we need to engage our high school staff in different solutions and structures to support their workload management. I heard just from another superintendent last week that is going out of state to a pretty large teacher fair in Pennsylvania. And what we're seeing across the state, we don't see this so much in North Dakota, because a lot of North Dakota school districts like Jamestown used ESSER as more of a long-term strategy. We talked about that when ESSER came about. Don't hire a bunch of staff, because then you're going to fall off the ESSER cliff, and you're going to have to then cut those positions or find a way to sustain them. And so a lot of states outside of North Dakota did hire positions. And so now the national trend is you're seeing these ESSER-funded positions no longer have sustained funding. Now you're seeing more teachers out in the, looking for positions because their positions were cut, or somebody else's position was cut and a veteran person was moved into their position. So if there's an opportunity for us to bring more teachers into the state because of that, I think we need to look at that. And of course, we always want to continue to build that competitive salary and benefit structures the best that we can to recruit and retain. Again, understanding that every change we need to make needs to be sustainable. But I will say, I was looking earlier today at Heidi Eckert did a wonderful job in talking about our child care. I asked her to put out some options and scenarios and say, I'm at this place in my home looking at the child care and what that cost would be for my family. Try to make it tangible for people. And the amounts ranged in those 6 or 7 different scenarios for staff, ranged between $49 per child per month all the way up to about $500. So that's significantly less. I think strategies like that are really going to help us recruit and retain good people. What we've done with Medallis and bringing in that partnership with Medallis almost a decade ago, I think is a thing that makes us different as a school district than other districts. Districts don't have near-site clinics that they can offer to their staff. Parental leave, our child care program, those are all the types of things that I think are going to help us recruit and retain really high-quality teachers. So with that, I would stand for questions and recommended action to accept the monitoring report.
Any questions before we move into a motion to approve? Oh,
I didn't even breathe long enough to
Yes.
allow Mr. Gaylor to add it.
Adam.
I'm actually,
Yes.
I think you hit all the high points. One thing about this goal in particular is that it says by 2025, so for the strategic planning committee, you will have to consider what's the update to this? Are
Yeah.
there some more specific things? And then it talks about the study of those models and schedules. And some of the recommended actions might be things that you want to turn into other goals.
Yeah.
But that's for that committee to discuss, really.
yes, and we're looking at scheduling a meeting soon, so that'll be a good thing to conclude on our agenda for that. Any other questions from the board? If not, is there a motion? Motion by Dan. Is there a second? Second by Aaron. We have a motion and a second to approve Strategic Focus 3 Engagement of Learning Goal 2. Any discussion? Aaron.
Yeah, so on this one here, I'd like to, and I am on the strategic planning committee, but I'd like to get a little bit more aggressive in this area, taking a more holistic approach and looking at not just one side of the equation, but both sides of the equation in terms of the scope of work that we're trying to accomplish with the resources that we do have. And I've raised comments on that before in terms of, the size of our curriculum and different things. But I also like to look at, the org structure that we're operating under. I'd like to challenge the equity model to some degree. Just different things. I'd like to, like I say, get a little bit more aggressive on this because I think it's something that we need to do and improve our efficiencies and whatnot. And then along with that, I think we need to get to a quantified metric of what it is that we're going to, how are we going to measure success on this? So we have some background now with the survey scores. So that's one point. But in terms of the primary function of what we're trying to do, how is this one affecting that? How good are we performing in strategically improving the district in this area?
I agree with that. I do think there's more metrics we can, we touched on some of them but didn't quantify them out, number of extended contracts, amount of time that's provided, collaborate, in opportunities to collaborate with, peers. I think those are some of the metrics we can look to, but I agree we need to define those out quite a bit more.
Yeah, and I think, looking at also the scope of work, what are we asking our teachers to do on a daily basis? And is that really necessary for everything that we're asking for? Or is there a different approach that we can take such that, I don't know. I don't know what the answers are, but this is where I want to have that discussion, with the multiple stakeholders and see what we can come up with.
And so the strategic planning committee will be meeting, but as always, if other board members have some input that they'd like to have to the strategic planning committee before we meet, you can just let me know or Dr. Luck know, just to make sure that that's also noted on our strategic planning agenda. So thank you, Erin. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion, a second for Strategic Focus 3, Engagement of Learning, Goal 2. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. We've rescheduled the Board of Education to another meeting. Superintendent's report, Dr. Luck is next.
Before I get into my written report, just wanted to add, you had public comment earlier today. My intention would be to add a section in my superintendent's report next meeting that addresses specifically the policy that we have on foreign exchange students, a state law related to open enrollment, and a recommendation on the policy, whether to maintain it as it is, here's the rationale why, or to make changes, here's the rationale for why. So I'll do that at my next meeting, just so people understand that we have public comment, you know, the role of public comment is to provide feedback to the district. But just because we don't respond back in public comment doesn't mean we don't hear the comment. But that would be my intention, is to include that as a superintendent's report. So as part of my written report, you have personnel that are there that we'll be acting on later. The change order request I outlined, we have two different ones. The one's a very small one, change order 6. That's about $582. Change order number 7 has been a process to get to, and I've outlined what the problem was the architect and engineer mislabeled condensing unit, ordered the wrong unit. We needed a much larger unit. And so quite a bit of discussion has occurred over the last weeks and months related to making sure that we get the right one ordered and that we are charged only for the right one. And so this change order represents what is the proper unit and what would be our, what I consider to be the appropriate cost of that change order. So it does exceed our contingency budget, which we have included. We have to keep that Google document that shows where our contingency is at, and that is would require us then to utilize the building fund. What I will say is the building fund does have available, you know, has the ability within the budget to cover that cost. That is a unit that was already targeted in the short term for to be replaced. I should say in the capital projects plan to be replaced. I think this grant for the CTE project allows us to do that a little bit earlier, but there is a building fund commitment to replace that unit. It is a unit that needs to be replaced. It does provide temperature control, which is required in our child care program to be between 65 and 75 degrees. It is frustrating to be in the position that we're in, to have the wrong unit ordered, but this is the correct unit, and you know that's the cost associated with that. So I just want to pause for questions if there are any.
Any questions about the change orders from the board? Okay, continue.
So I referenced earlier the Washington Elementary transition. We are getting very, very close. I finished a draft of the FAQ document today. Once we get that reviewed from a few more eyes, I'm working on a notification letter that will go to our Washington families that align to our new elementary boundaries to help to communicate that. We've just talked internally about having what we're calling a resource center on our website. So all of the documents that have gone into the process to make this particular change, whether it be the Enrollment Facilities Task Force board memos, the enrollment and boundary study, letters, FAQ, all of that will be housed online in one place so people don't have to look for it. They'll just go to online to say Resource Center, click on that, then all of that information will be available for people. So those are things that we're working on in the short term. I referenced earlier, we made our last placement now for a certified teacher. Emma Mickelson will be moving from 3rd grade in Washington to 3rd grade in Roosevelt. Mr. Carlson will be moving from 3rd grade in Roosevelt to 4th grade in Roosevelt. So we have a handful of other staff that we are still looking at, but I anticipate those being completed in April 7th. So again, moving pretty quickly. I feel really good about that. I outlined in my report something I'm really proud of. The nation's report card came out, and those are NAEP tests. NAEP tests are provided. It's supposed to be a representative sample of school districts across the state, and they are reported by state, not by district, even though we are randomly selected, I'm using my air quotes, but randomly selected in the middle school every year. But I think that's because of sample size. But we provide those tests every year, but North Dakota performs very well. You hear a lot about PISA scores. Those are when you see international comparisons, how did the U.S. do compared to Singapore or Finland or whatever the comparison is. They're often using the PISA, and then there's also the TIMS. But if you took North Dakota on its own as its own country, in our 4th grade math, we were number 3 in the nation. That puts us in the top 10 in the world in 4th grade math. If you look at 8th grade math, we scored number 2 in the, I'm sorry, in 8th grade math, we're number 2 in the nation, in the top 10 in the world. In reading, we were number 7th in the nation. In 4th grade, number 12 in the nation. In 8th grade, both of those rank us in the top tier internationally above, you know, people always point to Finland, for example, and Canada as having very high reading scores. We actually would outperform Finland in reading in our 4th grade and in our 8th grade. And I think what it validates what we already know about our North Dakota teachers is they are outstanding professionals that work very, very hard and are just wonderful teachers and very dedicated to excellence. So I want to recognize what they do every day. I wanted to point out 4 different bills that I've highlighted. I had a lot of different bills in the Legislative Assembly. I want to point out a couple or just to talk about. 1223 is one. Expulsions, there's kind of a misconception about expulsions that if a student is expelled, they are expelled in perpetuity for, you know, forever. We can't do that. That's not how expulsions work. Expulsions are to the end of the school year. And the reason why this bill is important is because I gave you an example in my report. Right now, only dangerous weapons are a full year suspension, and that's a calendar year. Every other expulsion runs from the date it occurred or date of the hearing. I'm the hearing officer for the district. From the date that they occurred to the end of the school year. So in this example, so what you could have, the reason why this bill is important is if you had an offense that occurred in September that warranted an expulsion through the end of the school year, you could have the exact same offense, exact same circumstances happen in May, and you can only expel till the end of the school year. That creates an inequity, it creates confusion, because if what this bill would do is allow you to do it as long as a calendar year. So you'd have a little more consistency. So if an offense was a year-long expulsion, you'd be able to accommodate that. For example, if a student, again, was expelled in May for a serious offense, say it's violence or a threatening action, other staff, students might question, well, what happened? Why is this only 3 weeks? The one that happened in September was all year. And this would allow us to create a little more consistency around what is an appropriate expulsion. And that doesn't mean that every expulsion would be a calendar year. We make those determinations based on the hearing itself. This would just change what that maximum could be and to be able to provide consistency. So that's 1223. 1575 in 1168, I've just outlined what the 2 different philosophies around property tax relief are going to be. And I'll touch on those if you want me to go into more detail, but I provided those as highlights. That's 1575 and 1168. 1369 I've talked about before. That's the K-12 funding bill. What I want to touch on is we are far enough along that we can kind of start to quantify what some of these changes mean. So if we're talking a 2%, and that's the bill that came out of the House, or that's the amended version that came out of the House, that would change our per pupil payment to $11,293, and then the second year, $11,519. 3%, it changes that to $11,400, and then $11,740. But what's important about that is not the numbers of the per pupil, but it's the impact in our state funding. Our projection would be a difference of about $700,000 between 2% and 3%. So it's a significant change. 2%, 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but that difference equates to about $700,000. One of the biggest reasons that is this is actually a suggestion we've had for a very long time. We've done a lot in our state to address rapid enrollment school districts, those like West Fargo that are adding 500 students a year. That should have been a first priority. I totally support that. But we don't want to forget that we have a lot of schools in North Dakota that are declining in enrollment. And what the 3-year average, enrollment average does is right now, our funding is based on spring ADM or fall enrollment, whichever is higher. This would change it to allow an average of the last 3 years in your spring ADM. So it's a smoothing effect where a big decrease in enrollment doesn't hit you right away. It allows you to address it over time. That's a significant difference for Jamestown in a declining enrollment school right now. That impact is about $752,000 by that 3-year smoothing. But one of the reasons I want to bring that up is that is a short-term impact. That's an average. So eventually that's going to come back down because we're just seeing the impact of larger enrollment, but eventually that 3-year smoothing is going to compress. And so you're seeing, I just don't want to look at that impact and go, whoa, we now have all of these funds that we can do something different with. We can decrease our tax base or whatever. That's short-term impact. And so we just want to recognize that over time that difference is going to compress. We aren't going to see all of those funds in the long term. Decrease to in lieu adjustments is about $51,000. I appreciate seeing additional funding coming back to us, but I think the in lieu adjustment is going the wrong way. 75% is where the in lieu adjustments go now. If you remember, those adjustments are done to provide equity between school districts. If you want to create more equity, you move from 75% to 100%. That's equity. Moving from 75% down to 65% gives us a little more money, but it distributes the rest of those funds inequitably. So oil and gas, coal severance and coal conversion, districts that have a large amount of that county revenue, they see big wins. We see $51,000. They might see $250,000, $300,000 in that. You're actually moving further away from equity. I would like us to see all of those at 100%. That's equity. Then it isn't about geographically, where do you live in the state. You should have the same education opportunities regardless of where you live. And the further you move that in lieu down, in my opinion, the greater inequity that gets created between those districts that have, those that are wealthy, and those that are not. And so, yeah, I appreciate the $51,000, but I think it's a movement in the wrong direction. I talked in the past about the special ed factor weight change. That was eliminated, amended out in the House. But that impact, if that was changed, that weight from 0.88 back to 0.095, the impact of that is about $160,000. So in Jamestown. So that makes a significant difference. Again, those weights don't seem like a big deal, but when you quantify them out, that is actually a big deal. And this is a perpetual increase then. That isn't like our 3-year smoothing, where it's kind of a temporary bump that'll eventually normalize. That's a perpetual one. So last thing, spotlight Cadence Golding. We had an 8th grade student in Jamestown Middle School, won our very first state championship for girls wrestling recently. So we want to recognize her, wrestled at 124 pounds. We'll have her recognized here later, but I wanted to point it out as well. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions for Dr. Leck regarding the superintendent's report this evening? Okay. Moving on in our agenda, we have nothing under old business. Under new business, nothing under activities. Under buildings and grounds, we have the approval of change orders for JVCTC expansion, number 6, which is the light switches, and number 7 is the condensing unit. Is there a motion? Motion of Aaron for approval. Second by Steve. We have a motion and a second for approval of the change orders, number 6 and number 7. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any other questions about that condenser or anything else? Okay. If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. We have nothing under curriculum assessment instruction. Under finance, approval of the 2025 summer school fee and salary schedule. Is there a motion? A motion by Melissa. Second by Jason. We have a motion and a second for approval of the 2025 summer school fee and salary schedule. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Budget revisions, did you have a chance to look at those? Any questions for Christie on those? If not, is there a motion? Motion by Dan to accept, second by Jason. We have motion and second for approval of the budget revisions. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. General fund balance and monthly financial reports are there for your information. Any questions for Christie on those at this time? Okay. Nothing under operations. Under personnel, we have A, accept letters of resignation for the 2024 to 2025 extended contracts. And for our public, these are just extra, this is just extra work. It's not resignations from their full-time positions for these teachers. So we have number one, it's Kimberly Carpenter, Shelley Moldson, Denise Wood, Cody Mickelson, Colton Altringer, Jason Carroll, Cassandra Rayburn, Reagan Salea, Lynn Kozel, Tim Ranum, Carla Rosario, Denise Tome, Marshall Krieger, and Zeb Willer. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa. Is there a second? Oh, second by Jacob. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? And we thank these teachers for their work. Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Under B, would the board mind if we, for these next two, if we just approve them all at one time? Okay. Approval of resignations at the conclusion of 2024 to 2025 school year. Number one, Reagan Salea, Faith Justison, and Steve Justice. Is there a motion? Motion by Jason, second by Dan. We have a motion and a second for approval of resignation at the conclusion of 2024 to 2025 school year, number 1 through 3. Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved, and thank you for your service to our district. C, approval to hire for the 2025 to 2026 school year upon successful background check. Jared Bartles, Marianne Peringa, Brian Knox, Morgan Bossingham, Morgan Hare, and Preston Myers. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa, second by Steve. We have a motion and a second for approval to hire for the 2025 to 2026 school year upon successful background check number 1 through 6. Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved, and welcome to our district. Nothing under policy and procedures. Under tuition, we have A, approval of tuition agreement for a 6th grade student from Montpelier. Is there a motion? Motion by Melissa. Second by Owen. We have a motion and a second for approval of tuition agreement for a 6th grade student to Montpelier. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Nothing under other. Items for future agenda. Are there any items for future agenda? And if you have any at any time, please contact Dr. Lecker or myself. Also, the strategic planning meeting will be coming up. And so if you have anything for that, please let us know. Meetings to be scheduled. A, the Finance Committee's meeting on Wednesday, March 20th, 5:15 in the Central Office Conference Room. We also have our school board meeting on Monday, April 1st at 5:15 in the Thompson Community Room at the middle school. That isn't a joke. We are meeting on April, is that right? I think that's a date. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Let me just check my date here. I want to say that didn't quite sound right, but let me look at my calendar. Okay, it's going to be the 7th of April.
At least it's the first.
April 7th. Okay. So that was a joke. So, yep. Are there any committee meetings that we're missing that we don't have on our agenda here? Okay. If not, is there a possible executive session to discuss negotiation strategies? Okay, no motion. Monthly superintendent evaluation is Section 2, Board Relations, and Section 3, Human Resource Management. There being no further business before this board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.